And good morning to all of you, or good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. There's people from all kinds of different time zones in here. So my assistant, Nick, is not present. So I'm running everything today, which means that I may have a little distraction on the chat. So not the chats, on the letting people in the room. So let me bring up the share here so we can go on. So I'll check that and make sure that we have people trying to get in the room, and I need to be sure that they can get in. So that's that. I have to do that today, so that's fine. Let's see, few updates before we start. So this will not be relevant if you're listening to this at a later date, because this will already be over. But we had an issue with in that there was a court ruling not long ago by a judge. It was a judge, or not a judge, but I guess not an opinion. It was a law, and it was, so the FAA had prosecuted a company from Kissimmee, Florida, which was doing warbird rides. And so basically, what out of this came, this judge decided that flight instruction was for hire when you're taking a passenger. And FAA never thought that, right? So that's why you don't need a medical, unless you need to be a pilot command to be a flight instructor. You don't need to have anything other than a third class or basic med if you do. But now, all of a sudden, it meant that all of our flight instruction falls under an air agency certificate. The only way we can do it. So we either have to be a 121 air carrier or a 135 operator, because we're providing services for hire. So the AOPA, all the alphabet soup agencies got on that. And just yesterday, I can tell you that the bill passed the House, which was an amendment to the National Defense Authorization Act, which no one's going to oppose. Most likely not going to oppose it. So it's going to pass. And so it goes to the Senate here in a next week, and it should pass easily. So that monkey should go for back, and basically says flight instructor is not for hire. That simply says that. And that will put that to bed forever, unless that would be law. So that'll be good for us. So when that happens, we can all breathe a sigh. Now the FAA is not prosecuting, except for in limited and experimental category, especially the limit, that they were doing that. So they weren't doing it as of last week. So now that they know that's coming, I don't think they're going to be doing that. So I don't think they have a need or want to do it either. So there's that. They recognize for a century, not quite a century, since the 50s, that, or even before that, flight instruction not for hire. So that's, anyway, that'll be irrelevant too if you're listening now. But you'll at least know that time occurred in history where we it was not a good thing. Okay, so today what we're going to talk about is what's on the outline here that you can see, which is you get this, by the way, at the end of every show. We'll send this to you. So we're going to cover basically how you keep your staying current as a CFI, and not just staying current legally, but staying current with some other things, right? So some things I wanted to show you. Let's see, some things I want to show you before we get, well, I want to show you at the end, I guess. I want to take you to our website quickly, and I want to show you where you can opt in for our newsletter, which we do, our podcast. You can see that we do one every 2 weeks. And then it's very opinionated. It's called Flight Training the Way I See It. And we've done about, 30 episodes or so of those over the years. So they're all there. And then there's the membership site, which is free, basic. It's at basic level. And so I'll show you where all it's at so that it's easy for you to find. And then that's all I'll do with that. Last thing I wanted to say, and this again will be a little bit irrelevant for those of you who are listening and you're not live. So we made a decision about maybe a few months ago to order some shirts, some polos. They're embroidered shirts with our logo. And so those we have on our website. They're not cheap, but we don't want to be in the shipping business. Like I said, I think I said that many times. So we don't like have printed copies of things, and because we make such small runs that it doesn't make any sense. So these aren't cheap, but they're really high quality shirts. And my friend owns the company, and so he gave me a kind of an upgrade. It was supposed to be Eddie Bauer shirts, but now they're another shirt, which I'll show you. So anyway, you can order, but when they're out, they're out. All I've got is medium, large, extra large, and I think there's 26 or 25 of them in there. So if you're interested in that, you should probably go do that as soon as you can, and then Nick will send those out to you. Or if you're not interested, don't worry about it. They're just something we did. We wanted basically for our CFIs to have a couple of shirts each, so new ones, and the ones we had before were such great quality, just like these. They lasted and lasted and lasted. That was 5 years ago. Some of the shirts are 5 years old and they still look great. So there you go. Enough of that. Let's get on to the program. So some questions then before we that I want to answer or ask. I'm saying, and those questions will come like, why do you want to be a CFI? Let's see. Oh yes, right. Someone's talking about the mouse. I have a rat in my house, which is really great. So anyway, I've tried everything. Okay, on topic again. It says, how do you become a CFI? That's kind of an thing because some of you want to be one. And so it's a good opportunity just to take like 2 minutes and tell you. Generally, so to be an airplane, single engine land CFI, you have to have that rating, number one. You also have to have an instrument rating and a commercial pilot certificate for airplane single engine land. Once you have that, then there's no particular prescribed time that you have to put in. So it's not like you have to do like for 40 hours of this, 20 hours of that. There's nothing. It just says you need to meet this aeronautical knowledge and you need to do this on the flight proficiency side. So there isn't any aeronautical experience. So you could do it as quick as an hour if you wanted to, a half hour, 20 minutes. I don't think you'll be successful at that, but you could, right? But anyway, the idea is that so to become a CFI, you have to have a certain amount of aeronautical knowledge. This is in the regulation subpart H in part 61, so you can look at it if you want to. And the aeronautical knowledge is the fundamentals of instructing, and there's technical subject areas that are sort of intense. There's a lot to that, right? And there's no home study course allowed. So we do have an online course, which you know about, but we have to do in-person or online learning. We can do remote learning, that counts, that's okay. But basically, if you have our online course, you just basically add your own CFI at the end of it, and that takes care of, I would say, 90% of the aeronautical knowledge. The only thing we can't assess there is your ability to teach. So then, so that's how you become one, is you have to be eligible. So you're gonna be 18, you gotta have a commercial pilot certificate. You don't need a medical certificate. You can get it without a medical, which some people don't know. As long as the examiner will be willing to be pilot command, which sometimes is a challenge, but some will just say that's fine. You can do that, and then you'll take two knowledge tests. One is the fundamentals of instructing, which everybody hates, and it's because no one really understands it, and no one really wants to understand it. I suppose we're the only country really that has that. So what I would say to that is, and I've said this many times, I think, I have pretty strong opinions on things, but I used to examine for a living. I was a pilot examiner for the FAA, and I did initial CFIs. When we come to the FOI, fundamentals of instructing, there's I think A, B, C, D, E, there's like 7 areas within there that have to be tested: human behavior, effective. So I thought about this, and I see these guys and girls all memorizing things like Reaper, PPAR, and all these things, and that's kind of all they know is just a rote level response to like tell me what's the definition, how you define learning, and then the answer always would come, it's a change of behavior result of experience. What does it mean? I don't know. The next answer comes, right? So anyway, but I think it's very interesting because I told this DP that's around and now here, I said, why are you testing the FOI like line item by line item, expecting to hear those kind of responses? I mean, he said, well, it means they've been in the book. I said, well, but if you gave that same test to an educator, to someone who teaches high school, like who's taught high school for 20 years and is the best teacher, they won't pass the test. They're not going to pass the test because they don't know they just apply what the principle is, right? And this is what we should be doing, but no one, some people do that and some people don't. So everybody struggles with this FOI thing, and that's part of the reason people don't become CFIs, because there's a big obstacle in the way. Plus, it's a very long check ride. So our tests here go, are you ready? 8 to 10 hour oral, right? 8 to 10 hours. And then there's a 2-hour flight, and people are just exhausted, right? But we prepare you for that. And no breaks, no break. Right? It's like no lunch break, nothing. But it's not peppering you with questions all the time. There is a lot of conversation. Other places, the quickest I know is 5 hours, around there. That's the fastest one I know of. And you're like, so it's kind of a big thing in the way. And also the pass rate is terrible. Nationwide, it's very low. Our pass rate's very good. It's 90%, 93% right now, first time pass rate. It's funny, there's a particular competitor of ours who makes me chuckle sometimes. His pass rate's about close to 0, right? Let's say it's 10 or 20%. And you might know, I won't say who it is. I'm not going to say who it is. But but when you call and you ask what's the pass rate, they say, well, it's 100%. But they don't say that for the first time. That's 100% if you take the test 2 or 3 times, right? Then you'll get it, right? So you have to be careful with that. That's the funny thing. And so that's how you become a CFI. So you really need to find somebody, someplace, that does this, right? It's really hard for you to, and I talked about this in the podcast that I just did the other day, which will be out here, I think, next week. So the idea is that when you become a CFI, you need to have a CFI who understands the content. So you can go to one that says, oh, what do you do? You interview, like, what do you do? What is your day-to-day like? And so I teach student pilots, private pilots, and occasionally, like once every year or two, I do a commercial. This is not your guy. This is a guy who knows how to do that, right? That's fine. What you need is someone who understands the flight instructor regulations, understands the fundamentals of instructing, all the technical subject areas, all these things, and endorsements, FAR Part 61, like the back of their hand, so that you can give a scenario like I'll give you an example. This is a good thing to give an example for. So if you go to any CFI that you're thinking about doing flight instructor training with, and they can't answer this question, then you might want to reconsider using that CFI. And those of you who do this, you may not know it either, but it's at least I'll just tell it to you. Then you could say, okay, so we have a glider pilot who's commercial, and that glider pilot wants to become a commercial pilot, airplane single engine land. And so what I always ask the class is first thing is, what's the starting regulation? Where do you start? And so people, when they don't know, will go right to the commercial pilot section of the FAR to airplane single engine land and see what they need to do. That is not the place to start. So just so you know, there's another regulation, 61.63, additional categories and classes. That's where you start, because this person may or may not need a knowledge test, and they may or may not need to meet the aeronautical experience requirements. So that's the first thing. The second question I would ask is, how do you solo this person? You know they're going to need solo time in an airplane single engine land. How are you going to do it? And so what happens is, let's see, is that Nick just joined. So I want to do something here. Just give me 1 second. There we go. I want to make him co-host so he can do what he wants to do. Just one moment. Okay, that should happen in a second. Did that make co-host? Here you go. And I've already started the recording, just so you know, Nick. So that's that. Okay, so the next question then is how do you solo that person, right? Just to give you an example. And so I'll give you the answer so you can test your CFI. Well, this is as though usually the instructor would say, well, I'll give them a student pilot certificate and I'll do the student pilot stuff. Well, unfortunately for you, the student pilot section doesn't apply. You're not a student pilot. You have a commercial pilot certificate. So that section will never apply to you again, nor will the limitations apply to you again. So what you do is you train them up to proficiency to solo an airplane. You give them endorsement 61.31 Delta 2, which is to authorize them to solo an airplane which they don't hold the category and class for. There's no 90-day endorsement. This never expires. You have to limit it. They can go cross country. They can go all around the whole country if they want to. They can fly at night, day, whatever they want to do with this thing. It's one endorsement, and it never expires unless you limit it. So these are the kind of things. And these are also the kind of things that do come up on flight tests. And these are just to test your depth and scope of knowledge. So that's kind of that. How long is my CFI good for? It's good for 2 years. It's the only certificates, our CFI certificates are the only ones that actually expire. So they will be good for 2 years from at the end of the month in which it was issued. So that's the first thing to know. So it does have an expiration date. Your pilot certificates don't. Your medical does. And that may be the reason you can't use your pilot certificate, right? Because the medical a lot of times. So that's that. Now, as a CFI, by the way, you don't need a medical certificate. I told you this, and you don't believe me, but if you look in 61.23, which is, and I know the regulations like that in my head, right? It's kind of weird, but I know those. So that's medical requirements. You will look down there and you'll find a section which talks about flight instructors, and you'll see that it says in those words, basically it says you only need to have only need to have either basic med or a third class medical as the maximum. You never need a second class. You're not exercising your privileges as a commercial pilot. That's what that court case was all about, and we're getting that over to a law written in here in the next week with the Senate about flight instruction not for hire. So therefore, you don't need a second class medical. You only need a commercial pilot certificate to qualify to be an instructor. It's just a qualification requirement. You're not using it. What you're using is nothing. You're using your teaching credentials. And if you need to be the pilot in command, well, then you need to have a medical certificate or basic med. In that case, so like for student pilots. But if you're doing, so I'll tell you something funny, which you'll like. You always like it when I say things that are funny, right? So I think it was about 4 or 5 years ago, I was super, super, super busy. I just kept increasing my rates. I figured that would work, right? And it will work over some time, but it just kind of got ridiculous. I was charging like $125 an hour, and I still have the line out the door to fly private pilots, and of course it's the Bay Area of San Francisco, so there's no shortage of cash in Palo Alto, right? So they just wanted to do that, I'm like, okay. And so then it got busy. And then also I fly 67 different types of airplanes. Last count was 67. And basically anything at the airport that isn't exotic, I fly over. I fly Mooney Ovation, all these things. And so then the club that I'm teaching at has 55 airplanes, some weird ones. And it was like, oh, it's near the end of the day. And I get this, oh, hey, Mike, can you fly the Mooney Ovation up to Sterling to get the avionics done? You can take an Uber back. And I'm like, looking around, there's nowhere else in the whole school who fly on Mooney Ovation. And I'm like, I don't want to do it. I don't need any more time. I have 16,000 hours, right? 2 years, full-time, 24/7 on an airplane, right? So I'm trying to get out of it. And then they don't want me to get out of it. And if I say no, then I'm like I'm the bad guy, right? And so the same with student pilots. I mean, they would come in, oh, can you please, I'm going to Tokyo. Can you please do this phase check for me? I got to go like 2 days from now. The only time I have to do it's tomorrow at 7. Can you go up at 5 a.m. in the morning? And I would say yes, right? And so what I did after that, I just didn't renew my medical. Good plan, right? For those of you, I didn't renew it. I just said, I'm not doing it. And so then when it came, hey, Mike, can you fly the Mooney Ovation? Oh, yeah, you can't, right? Yeah, sorry. Okay, I'll ask someone else. Great, I got out of that. And then it trimmed down what I do to only people who could be PIC, which were commercial pilots and CFIs. And that my life was a lot better ever since then. So I did do the other stuff. So I'm qualified to be PIC again, but I don't want to be. So that's how long it's good for. So things are tied to your medical. Now, how do you renew your flight instructor certificate? Because this is kind of a tricky one. So I put the items down here. It's actually listed as separate points, but they're kind of sub to 3. So the first thing we can say is there are certain things I won't do, and this is one of them, but you may want to do it. It depends on your situation. But if you can renew an activity. So if you have at least 5 people that you've submitted to a practical test, and at least 80% have passed from the first time, you can go make an appointment at the FSDO, wherever that is for you. You can go in there and they will issue you, you prove that with you have to keep a record of that. So, and they'll look in something called SPANs, which is, they can verify it too. Anyway, you look into that, and what will happen is they will issue you a new temporary, and it'll be good for 2 years from the month in which it was issued. Now, so that's one way to do it, right? The other way to do it, which you're unlikely to get, but it is a way, is you can be action by an FAA inspector who regularly observes you. So when I was a DPE, they just renewed our flight instructor certificate every year because they were watching us do things, and so they just renewed it based upon knowing us. So it's by acquaintance, but it's you have to the inspector, work in some. You may be able to do it like as a fast team member, maybe, I don't know, something you may be able to, but that is available, but it's in the order, it's not in the regulation, it's in the FAA, in the order 8900.1, which is the inspector's order. 8900.2 is the DPE order. So you can look at those online too. If you ever wanted to have a nice read, you could look at that and see how things go. So how things are supposed to go is there. So there's that. So that's that order. The other thing you can do, which is the most popular thing to do, is 2 things. One is you can do another instructor rating. So if you don't have a II or MEI and you do that, that renews your CFI for another 2 years from the date, end of the month that you did it. So that's kind of popular way to do it because people want to add some of those ratings usually. And then the third way, which is absolutely the most popular way, is to do something called a Flight Instructor Refresher Clinic, which is a slang name called a FIRC, F-I-R-C. And so this is an interesting one because you do this online or in person. I'll give you some advice. Don't do the in-person. It's a waste of time. So all it is, I hate saying it, but I'm going to say it anyway because you know how I am. So anyway, it's a bunch of people who are never going to fly one day in their life again, who are just keeping their CFI current. That's all it is, right? And so 90% of it, I would say, not all of it. And so you may have one that you've been to that was good. And if you do, recommend that. But in general, I do the online one. And the reason I do it is selfish reasons. So the first is I rotate through all of them. So I'll go through King Schools, GLIME, Sporties, AOPA. I go through then another one, whatever the other one is. And so I rotate through those every 2 years. And so the way they're structured is supposed to be 16 hours long. So the FAA has kind of insisted that that the FERC providers say, how do we know that the person did all the 16 hours? So what King School does is they have videos, and you got to pick the one video. You can't take the test, you can't take the quiz or anything until you've watched all the videos and read all the stuff, which equates to this amount of time for that module. And so what I do, I like that because those videos are kind of like 20 some minutes. So I turn on, go mow the grass outside, right? Clean something, like this, and go back and I pick the next video, then I go clean something else or go to the car wash, come back, whatever it is I need to do, right? Go to the store, cook something, right? And then when I get to the end of it, I take the test because this content I know. But there are always something like the tiny thing, or maybe one module about something like there was one about using electronic flight bags, which was okay. There were some things that I didn't know, and that was all fine. And then I'm interested. But if you know, that's the easiest way to get through it. So essentially, what I do also is the FERC. When you take this, it will renew your certificate. And if you do it within 3 months of your expiration date, the expiration date that's printed on your CFI. So mine is March. So mine will expire March of 2022. So what I will do, that's coming up, right? So what I will do is this December, I will take the FERC, but I won't quit the test. So during Christmas or whatever, the holiday time, I'll just do this FERC thing, right? But I'll do everything but the final exam. And then what we'll do, I'll let it go to January 1, January 2, then I'll take the final exam. And that way it'll spit out the graduation certificate saying January, and my CFI will expire not in January of 2022, but in March of 2022. If you renew within 3 months, you can keep your same expiration date 2 years plus later. So, but if I did it in December, then because it's not within 3 months, it would be December of 2020, that part. So I wouldn't be very good. So I don't want that. 2024, I guess it would be. Then 2023 for the other one. So that's what you need to know. Now, the other thing is, this is really bad, right? If you let your CFI expire, or you do the FERC and you don't have the certificate issued, what I mean by certificate issued, you have the temporary airman certificate. If you don't have that and it's past your expiration date, even though you did the FERC and you have your graduation certificate, it won't count. There's no way to unring the bell. Now you're subject to a reinstatement, which is only by a checkride. You can only do that via practical test. So any of you who've let your CFI expire, the only way you're going to get it back is there's a few ways, but one, it's going to be a practical test of some kind. So that's what you don't want. And by the way, there's one other way that you can renew your CFI. If it hasn't expired yet, you can take a check ride. And if you look in the PTS for flight instructor, you'll see in the beginning, there's just before the tasks start, there's renewal and reinstatement tasks. So they're like area of operation 1, which is the fundamentals instructing. You don't have to do. You don't have to do that. It's not required to be tested. And there's subsets. So you have some of the performance maneuvers are there, some of the landings are there, some of this and that. So it's like a 60% test, but it's still a test, right? And so I think most people don't do that, but I did have a couple people who did it. So I'll give you a fun story, fun facts again, right? So I think this adds context, and so you remember it better. It's basically what it is. So I did the guy was named Ralph, and he worked at this club called Sundance Flying Club in Palo Alto, right? And so he said, I want to renew my CFI. I said, was it expired? He said, no, that's reinstatement. Renewal is, and I said, why do you want to do it by flight test? Yes, I do. And so I said, okay. So I went over there because I was at the same place. And I saw Ralph, and he's 92 years old or 91, right? And I said, he said, why do you want to renew? I mean, you can just take the FERC thing, you'll be all done. Or you can renew activity. I said, how many? He said, I put through a lot of people here. He was a World War II Mustang instructor pilot. And he said, I get a medical every 6 months. He says, and I take my renewal every year. He says, and I do that because I don't want to call the ball unless it's really apparent. I said, I want one of you guys to tell me, hang it up. And so, but I did the test for him, and he was sharp. He was really good. So I went, I don't have any problem with you flying at all. You're great, right? No problems whatsoever. And the other one I did was with a guy who's not around anymore. His name was Kip Kipta. He was my first flight instructor in 1984 at Fremont Airport in California. And he was a NASA engineer. And I remember that I did everything. I didn't quite solo. Then I had to move to LA, and I forgot to pay him for like 4 hours. I didn't forget. I probably just didn't, right? Because when you're 20, you get there's the beer money, and there's the other stuff, right? So anyway, I left, and then when I went back and became a pilot examiner, I noticed something hanging up in the West Valley wall. It was like ground instructor at this class, Kip Kipta, and I knew him. I looked at his face. I said, "That's Kip," but he was 80. He's 80 now. And so then I found him, and I said, hey, I owe some money. And he's like, what? I said, and I told him who I was. And he says, well, I guess I'll look through my old log books. And so I said, I think it was like 4 hours, and it was 20 some bucks an hour then. Yeah, 20. So like $100 and something like that. So anyway, I factored in for inflation, for inflation and for over the years. And I figured I owed him about $400 some. So I said, I'm going to bring you $400 some and pay you, because I need to pay you for what you did, even though it was a long time ago. This was like in 2000 something, right? And so what he did instead was that, I renew my CFI by flight test he says, I don't care if I pass or not. I mean, that's up to you. He says, but could we just trade that out? And I went, yeah. And so I flew with my original flight instructor, who I haven't flown with for 25 years, 24 years, for another time. And it was great. So, and he did a great job. So he passed too. So there you go. So that's the kind of things you can do. So you can do it by flight test, but it's very rare. Okay, now continuing education. So again, so there's one thing about the FERC I wanted to say. So I don't go to the FSDO. I can renew based on activity or a lot of different ways, but I just renew via the FERC because, and it costs $25 extra. So usually the FERCs are somewhere around 150. And I think Sporty's does it for free if you're a member of SAFE. So if you join SAFE, Society of Aviation Flight Educators, you get 1/3 off ForeFlight, all your subscriptions. So joining SAFE is $45. That's already for me $100. And Sporty's gives you the free FERC, which is $150 or $130 retail value. But there's one thing you need to do. So if you're making notes, take this as a BF and a big frigging note, right? Is pay for it's called ACR services. It means Airman Certification Representative. I mean, they have someone in staff who can actually issue the temporary airman certificate, right? So otherwise you have to take your graduation certificate and go to the FSDO and have them issue it. They can't do anything by phone or by mail. You got to go, right? And so for me, the FSDO is maybe 30 minutes away. I'd rather be with a student and charge them $125 an hour. I mean, I lose money going to FSDO. It's just not worth it. So I just have them issue for $25. It's usually about $25. They'll issue it and I get my certificate by email. So my temporary airman certificate will come, and they'll make sure like, oh, who's expiring like at the end of the month? Let's get on it, boys, and stay until midnight and get it all issued. So they'll do that. So be sure that the graduation certificate that is not enough. So you need to have the certificate issued. And so again, what I do is I do it all in December. I take the test in January. That gives me plenty of time because you know how life goes. If you've been around this world long enough, things happen. And so all of a sudden it's like, oh, I got to go to a funeral. I got to go to a wedding. I have to go to a 2 weeks. I got to do this. I got to go to jail. For 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks. I don't know what happens, but things happen, right? Or you get sick or something. So do it as soon as the 3-month time comes, if you can, and then get the certificate issued by whoever does the FERC. And every one of them can do it. Okay, now going on, let's talk about continuing education. So this is the hall, and that's what a FERC is supposed to be. It's supposed to be continuing education. For me, I wish they would just make it more elective, like things that you would want to know about that would be instructive for you, but not this cookie cutter list of things. There are some electives, but the FERCs are pretty much the same with just a few classes that are different. So all the things I know already. I suppose it's good for someone who is trying to get, keep current, doesn't do it very much. It's okay for them. But for me, it's a complete waste of time. And so anyway, there's that. But anyway, I told you how to do it. So it takes me 4 hours to get through or sometimes 3 to get through the 16-hour FERC because I'm mowing the grass and doing all the other stuff, right? So, but continuing education is me. So if you look at anybody who's a flight instructor and you say, who stays the most current, I'm in that list, in the top, however many there are. I'm in that very high on that list, and that's for a reason. That's the hallmark of a great flight instructor because not doing it's going to make you irrelevant. So if you're one of these people who just want to show up to the airport and teach someone how to fly, and the only knowledge you have is what you had, 30 years ago, that's okay. But really, that's kind of and teaching you how to navigate using E6B, the nav log. That's not how we fly. I mean, let's just get over that. That's not how we fly anymore. We don't. And if you think that's true, then what does your student do once they leave it? Once they leave you? Oh, Harold's here. Great. I'll talk to Harold. Just joined. They go get ForeFlight on their iPad or they get something else, and that's how they fly. And you've not had the benefit of instructing them for 10 hours or more with that. You've given them some other method that they're never going to use again. Never. Who would do that? There's no parallels in medicine, and there's no parallels in any other discipline where, like, my friend's an anesthesiologist. Hi, Harold. So there you go. And Harold was in our initial CFI class that we just had. So he was remotely. So we'll let him say this, maybe say something in a minute. But there he is. He's from Maryland. So anyway, there's no parallels to this. And so so my friend is the anesthesiologist, doesn't go like, well, I think, for everybody in an anesthesiology class to really understand things that, I don't think we should use what's current. I mean, that's cheating. That's and what if it fails? Let's go back to ether. They don't do that, right? They're like, no, how about no? And I had a little surgery once. It was umbilical hernia, nothing. And I was terrified of this thing because I didn't want to wake up on the table and all this stuff that people think about. So I had my friend, anesthesiologist, talk to him about it. He says, don't have any thought about that. He says, right now, we monitor your brain waves and we have very low doses, all this stuff, so that if I see a spike in blood pressure, I can give you blood pressure medicine. I can give you whatever you need. And I said, we just watch all that. So he says, 20 years ago, we couldn't really do that. We just had to hit you hard, put you down, and then, hope that it all, pretty much if we put you down long enough, there was risk to that. So he says, now it's a lot better. So who doesn't want that, right? But no, in aviation, no, we've got to have an E6B and a navigation law, which Harold, unfortunately, was the victim of on Friday of the class. So I had made them do a manual, everything. And the argument was, for, the principles of navigation, how else do you, well, you understand it because you can teach it a much better way. You can teach it with using a wind triangle. You can use you don't have to use this thing and the nav log. It takes you longer to plan the flight than it does to actually do the flight. I think Harold, it took you guys to do the flight, which was to Bishop, from Palo Alto to Bishop, which is a flight of about 2.5 or so hours. It took them more than that to do the flight plan. And that's our conflict resolution day at CFI Bootcamp. It means that that's the day when someone says, well, that's I would never go that route. The other one says, what do you mean it's stupid? I think you should make it. Then that would be argument, right? And it's your day of learning how to manage conflict, right? So that's kind of fun. So anyway, so continuing education is very important. So that means that whatever's relevant, this is my iPad, and I'll tell you what's on it. What's on it is ForeFlight, and what's on it is Jepson charts. That's what's on it. In the airplane, there's Stratus or Centuries, right? That's what's there. And whatever's newest and better is going to be there too. That's what's going to be there. And I understand how it all works. And if you get me in an avionics package like the G5s or the G1000, and I'm sitting there with you, I know how it works, right? Because I take the time to understand how it works. I'm not fiddling with the buttons, right? So this is important that you continue education means you're staying relevant. So I told the DPE, he didn't like that when I challenge them all the time. They hate that. But anyway, so the reason that you're insisting upon paper charts, paper this, paper that, and not using ForeFlight is because you won't learn it yourself. You don't know how to use it. And I said, so you're supposed to be keeping up on things, right? That's part of your job, but you're not doing that. You're just doing what's easy, which means this is what I know. I wake up and I do a test using that, and I'll just make them all do that. Then that way I don't have to do anything. So I did a whole podcast on this, by the way, about there's another one. I want to tell you this too. So for those of you who are watching and it's not real time, which will be later after some months, or I'm going to do a special power hour. Ooh, probably during Christmas time, near there. It's going to be a 1 hour or more, we'll call it Power Hour Plus. And so what I'm doing is I've left paper a long time. As Harold, everybody knows I don't use paper, right? So I use all digital resources for everything that I can. There are a few cases where paper's better, but in general it's not. And so, but the problem is if you decide to be a digital refugee like me, which means you come from paper and then now you're going to all this. The problem is you have to have apps for your iPad and things on the computer. So there are things you have to know. And sometimes you get the wrong thing that doesn't work very well. And you go, well, this is terrible, right? And so what I'm going to do is take an hour, an hour and a half, and show you all the things that I use and how I move through all that, and show you why. Like I'll show you how to use ASA's far aim, where you can highlight with your finger, and then you can look back later. You can just look at only your highlights. It'll search only for that, or only your bookmarks. Right. So there's such great search, but the problem is people don't know how to use the technology, and then or the tool, and it's a problem. So you can hear the podcast. I did a whole thing on it yesterday, and it'll be available here in a few days. But I don't want to dwell on that. I just want to kind of talk about that. So continue education. Then a little casual conversation about how to be and how to pick a great instructor. Things to ask. So I want to fly with someone who needs the money. Right? I want to fly with someone that basically made this a career choice for themselves, because there are two types of flight instructors, maybe three. Let's call it three, but two in general. The first instructor is me. That's a teacher who just happens to be a pilot, right? I'm a teacher first, more than I am a pilot. And there's the other one, a pilot who has to be a flight instructor, right? And that can work out okay. There's nothing, I won't say anything necessarily wrong with that, but you'll notice the difference between a teacher and someone who needs to be a teacher for a particular period of time. And it won't take long to recognize the difference of that, right? So not that you shouldn't do it. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do it. And there's our lady from Zoan is here, so she would help review, teach, pre-fly as well. So hi. So anyway, I just see people zoom into the room, and there's 47 of you at the moment, because this topic isn't for everybody. It's for, but I sort of wanted to make it like, how do you pick a good CFI? Because you don't know. 90% of the time, the way it works is, and you'd think that the internet would have fixed this by now, that the mind of Google would, but if you go to any website that has to do with pilot training, they all look the same and they all say the same things. They basically just cut and paste from a regulation, 40 hours of this, 20 hours of that. This is what you need to do. Here's a picture of us flying over the Golden Gate Bridge, but the information is the same. No one wants to say it's really 70 hours. So most of them just restate the rule. And so then when the person comes in, that's the expectation. And they don't really describe, like we've had people say, well, I just need to collect. What do? I collect these 40 hours and they send me something in the mail? No. How about no? I also had a girl who was really funny. Listen to this. You'll really like this. So she comes in and says, I want to be a commercial pilot. I want to get my pilot certificate. That's what she said. I said, great. I always want to know why they want it, because that's the motivation, right? If they have a good reason for it, or they're just playing around with something. And so she said, well, I want to fly cargo. And I'm like, well, good. And she was about 50 something. I'm like, okay, because cargo don't pay nothing. Once you fly for FedEx or UPS, it pays really low. So I'm like, okay, what do you do before? She told me. So I saved up everything. I'm ready to go. And like, well, what do you want to do? I want to fly for cargo. And I said, well, who are you going to fly for? She goes, I'm going to fly for FedEx or UPS, because right after I get this pilot certificate, because then I can make $260,000 a year. And I'm like, well, what do you think the pilot certificate is? Well, I need to get the pilot certificate. And I said, how long does it take? She was going to, I already budgeted 40 hours. That's what I got, right? And as soon as I get it, I can work for FedEx, right? I'm like, oh, I don't think so. So we had the conversation about that. I said, it's going to take about 80 grand to get there. And then you got to work for commuters. You're not going to work for FedEx for like a long time. So it was like, really? I said, yeah, it's kind of the way it works. So that was kind of funny what people think. So we kind of have the edge. So that's what I mean is, when you have the opportunity to learn how to fly, if one of the power hours we have is picking a mentor, getting a mentor, and doing that before you learn how to fly, because they can help. Because sometimes you pick the wrong CFI and then you don't want to hurt their feelings. And yet every time you meet, you spend $300 or $400, right? And that's kind of hurting your feelings then at that point, right? So there are things that you need to ask. And so one of the things is, what do you do for a living? How long you've been here? The one everybody hates. How many of these have you done? If you're brand new, this is the one that like, oh, God, he asked it again. People keep asking that question because they want to know. I had one guy who had a funny answer to that. His name was Jonathan. I can't remember his last name. He's worked at our school. He never did one. And he said, I've recommended over 100 people for the knowledge test. So over 100 people. And that's what he left it as. Like, okay, that was pretty good. So anyway, that I guess, but I can tell you how to deal with that later, how to sell against that when that time comes. But that, I might probably want to know it now, but I'll tell you later. So then I also say that that picking a flight instructor at the lowest rate in the rate sheet, you look at this, all the clubs have this guy's this guy's that. And it's really funny because when you want to increase your rate, you sort of want to amp up your credentials, right? So at Advantage Aviation, they have business cards and they're black. And so they allow you to put things after your name. So you find, this guy who says CFI, ATP, CFII, MEI, Gold Seal, Tailwheel, Acro, all this stuff, right? And then he can charge more, right? And so what I did was they said, oh, you got to have a card here. And I said, okay. Because, I just put my name and I said everything. All right. Tail, everything. I just said everything, right? And they didn't like that. So that's why I was the most expensive CFI at the school, right? But sometimes the rate, it doesn't matter as much as you think. So if you actually sit down and do a spreadsheet, I've done the work here for you. You'll find out that the instruction rate is fairly insignificant to the training cost compared to the airplane rental rate and the other costs that are associated with flying. So I want to show you that because I think it's something that you can use to increase your hourly rate if you have one. So I'm going to take this as a case study. So here I'm going to give you the example of a senior career CFI who's done a lot of training and has submitted a lot of people for practice tests, and the pass rate's really good, usually 90% or higher. And that's a person who charges, let's say, I said $100 an hour, right? Because if you do this for work, you'll soon find out that you get tired of sleeping in a tent or in a homeless shelter outside and driving a 1985 Buick when your student comes in a BMW and looks like, okay, I'm ready to do something, is happy, right? You get tired of that. You may love to fly, but you'll get kind of tired of that pretty quickly. So you need to increase your rate to all of you out there. Just do it. So then I say the new CFI is brand new. I'm going to say it's 60. This is kind of Palo Alto numbers, or maybe they might be not as high, but the ratio is about right. So, and then the airplane rate is $160 an hour. That's my basis. So it's actually cheaper to learn how to fly with this guy at $100 an hour than it is with this guy at 60. And I'm going to show you why. Number one, the senior instructor is going to finish you in 55 hours. I'll finish you in 55 hours. It won't take me 75, 80 hours to do it, right? The new CFI will finish you in 70 hours, maybe more. It depends. And you'll have extra things like, oh, because you haven't been a CFI for 2 years, you have a mandatory stage check your student has to do. Well, there's another $500 added on to that. Or, yeah, now you got to do one for cross country. Now you need to do one in the course. And whatever that is, you'll have all that stuff in the way that you didn't think about, right? But if you just take it straight out of billing, here's my rate, $100, or not that instructor, time 55, $5,500. The ground is going to be about 35 hours. I'll spend 35 hours with you. If you don't do the home study, that'll be the post-flight briefings. That will be anything that you didn't do that you're supposed to do. That'll be that. And then there's the airplane. So it costs you $17,800 on the high end of things. And now the new CFI will charge you $60 an hour by 70 hours, which will be $4,200, close to that. They'll do more ground with you because they don't know what you don't know. They're not really good at that. Won't structure your learning as good as I can or someone else like me can. $60 an hour by that is $2,700. And the airplane, remember that I'm done with you in the airplane in 55 hours. You've got to pay another 15 more hours to fly with this person at that rate and the instruction rate, which now my part is done. This will cost you $18,100. So slightly more than me. And if it goes sideways, or that instructor decides to go to an airline or leave, then you know how that's going to go. Or you didn't solo yet, and that person leaves, now the person got to redo. So at least the senior one, you know that person's going to be there for the whole time and not going to have interruptions in training. And also knows how to take a bad day, like a bad weather day, and turn it into something valuable to keep the ball going up the hill, right? That's the idea. So that's the idea there. So that's what I wanted to bring out to you because I think that's interesting. Now, some things I want to go over with you. I have a few things to say. So the first thing, if you're not aware, is, we had a court case, which was saying that flight instruction is for hire, is what the judge said. And from that moment on, all of us who were flight instructors had to have an air agency certificate issued because we're now taking passengers. And we had to qualify either 121 or 135 to be flight instructors like that. Well, that wasn't going to happen. So anyway, AOP, all the other agencies or organizations got on board, and they got a bill through the House yesterday, which was attached to the National Defense Authorization Act. It's an amendment to the bill. And it basically said flight instruction is not for hire. That's basically what it said. And that's going to pass the Senate probably next week. So I think we're good. That's kind of going to be a nice thing to do. The other thing I wanted to tell you is, for whatever reason, we don't ship things. I told you we're not a shipping company. We don't have paper copies of anything. And the reason is just small runs. It just doesn't make sense, right? Like Teach Brief Fly retail was like 200 or 179, I think it is. Then if me to print it is another $50, and then I got to ship it to you, which is another 20, 15, right? So it just becomes like unmanageable. So, but what we did was we ordered these shirts. They're polo shirts. They're not from Eddie Bauer. They're from, I forgot the name of them, but they're really good quality ones, but they're not cheap. So, because I got them just the other day. So we ordered them because we're going to give our CFI shirts, but you can order them in our store. And when they're out, they're out. There's only 3 sizes: medium, we didn't do small. I don't know why. There's large and there's extra large. And there's only I think 25 total. So if you want those, we're going to ship one time. It's going to be our one time in the century shipping kind of thing. So that's new and that's there. And by the time you see this, if you're listening at some other time, that will be gone, and it may not be. I probably won't be there. We probably won't do it again for another year. Maybe once a year we'll do it, something like that. I don't know, but it's just kind of a pain to do, and then you never know. And I got to go down and get a bag, and put it in the bag, and seal it, and and you say we'll use a fulfillment center. Well, that's fine, but they want us to how many pallets will we be shipping out this month? Well, we're going to ship 25 shirts, right? So no pallet. You get a pallet once in a lifetime. So of shirts, right? So that's not going to happen with us. The other thing I wanted to show you is I want to go to our website quickly because I want to show you the other free things, not sellable things, free things that you can get that you may not know about that could be really helpful to you, right? And we're all about helping people, and charging you money for things when you show up. We're pretty good about that. But so this is our website. I want to now switch it over here to so you can see it too. It's here. It's CFIbootcamp.com. You've been there probably once already because you opted in at the bottom here. You can see the power hour thing. So you've already done that. You don't need to do that. But what I want to show you is there's an online store. I just want to show you quickly where the shirts are. It's digital documents. I don't know why it's under digital doc. I think we don't have a place to put it. And then once it comes up, oops, sorry, it's an annotation tool. When it comes up, I'll show you what it does here. Will or not. Okay, that's here, and you can pick. That's where that's at. Just so you know, I just want to show you where it's at, so you know when you say where is that, I can't find it. Well, that's where it's at. I don't know why it's under digital. I guess we don't really care because it's just mainly for you guys and people who know us, and no one off the street's gonna want to do that. So now under resource, there are 3 things here. So this is Bootcamp Plus. I'll show you in a second. This is our podcast, and this is the newsletter. And you don't get these automatically from us. You have to opt into those things separately, right? So on the Bootcamp Plus, let me just show you that first. So this is where you can get access to our membership site, and that is where we have things at different levels. So let me show you where it's at. So this is like their previous power hours, not all of them for the free level, and there's the podcast is here. So anyway, let me just go show you what it looks like, so you'll know which one to pick, and then you don't have to pay anything for it, right? So, and by the way, if this is basic over here, that's free, and this is what you get. There's a ton of things in here for free. Do it, right? And the second thing is, this is not for you. For power hour people, you get an offer at $9 a month. So you get all this stuff at $9 instead of 22. And the other one's premium one, but that's keeps you all of the stuff you've got from us current for as long as you have it. So that's what that is. But I don't want to sell you anything. I just want to show you that's there, right? So get this at the free level, and then you'll get an email from us. Like you'll get access, and it'll say what new things we have in there. And so there's these things. All right, so that's the first thing. Then the second thing is every 2 weeks we do a podcast. The podcast is audio. You can find it on Spotify. You can find it on the Apple podcast sites. You can find anywhere you find a podcast, we broadcast to that. So they pick us all up on that. And so the podcast is right here, and under resources, and it's called podcast. And then you can download the current one, or you can go and see all the other ones are there as well. And so it's sort of like this power hour, but it's audio, and it's opinion, a lot of opinion, a lot of what's happening in the industry and just things. So some of it will be in the first episodes, maybe a little dated, but there'll be still content in there that's relevant. And then the last thing on the resources is the newsletter here. And the newsletter is actually, I write it myself, and it's pretty good. I mean, it's really relevant things. So the one thing that I put in the article that's coming out, or the newsletter, there's 3 things that have come out in October. One is digital versus paper, how to leave, basically what the justification is to leave paper. And the second thing is round gauges versus glass cockpit, which is the right tool, which is the right platform to train in. So there's opinion and lots of data about that. And the third thing was it was something else that I wrote in there. Okay. I forgot what it was, but it was something it's interesting. So that's what's coming out. And so I do a podcast every 2 weeks. So the 1 week I do the podcast, basically a video podcast of the newsletter. So I just go through what's in the newsletter. And then the other podcast is on any other topics not related to the newsletter, because we only do newsletter once a month. So but what I did was, and for you power hour people who are sticking around long enough to hear this, I'm going to do a special power hour. It's power hour plus, and it's going to be sometime between 2 weeks from now and the end of the year. We'll pick a time, hopefully not right in the middle of the holiday, which is a little break. But what I want to do is I want to show you how to switch from paper to digital, all digital. So to make the leap of faith from I'm not using paper or anything anymore to I'm using everything digital. And then you decide at some point, well, I still like a notebook. And then you're allowed to do that. You're allowed to have that, right? But I'll show you all the tools that I use, because I vetted all this stuff over the years, right? So I've used everything from Adobe Acrobat Reader to Goodreader to PDF Expert to, and then you look at all the note-taking apps I've used, and I use Evernote, right? And I use one other thing. And the reason I did all that was because I went through the pain of all of it and saw what didn't work at all, and what was like, oh God, this is miserable, right? It's terrible, right? Why am I doing this, right? But my goal was to go all digital, and I've done that for the past at least 5 years, 6 years. I don't have any paper, I don't have any mail showing at my house with bills on it, none of that, right? And everything I have when I go teach you how to fly is right here, every single thing. The only thing I take is a headset, And if I don't have a ADSB, I take Scout or Sentry and put it in the airplane. That's it. And a battery pack. So that's what you get. So I'm going to show you how to do that. I'm going to guide you through what to do, what you need to get, and how to make that leap of faith for certain things. So I there's no more of this for me. There's no more. Here's the newspaper, and I look for articles that have been. Sometimes you want to see if you're in trouble. So you can, if I go to my digital version of the newspaper, I can type my name and see if I appeared, right? And maybe I'm in the obituary section. Oh, right, I didn't know that. So who knows where I'm at, right? So I can search for things if I'm interested in something, and it's still curated, but so it's just easier. I can take it right here, and I can zoom. I can pinch and zoom. But you have to get used to that. And so one of the things I say in the podcast, and I will tell you, is that if you're not working anymore, which some of you are in that frame, I hope, well, I don't think I'll ever be like that. But at any rate, the last technology that you used at work is probably what you know. So people struggle. They'll struggle with using iPhones. They'll struggle with using. They'll use the phone part of it, and sometimes the text messaging part. But they won't know how to use the web browser. Sometimes they won't know how to use anything, right? So I'm like, well, the first thing you have to do is learn how to use the tool. And that's a 20-minute or 30-minute investment of your time with the YouTube video. And I'll show you which ones to look at so you know how to use this. So you're not asking me, where do the files go? Send me a new link to that. Send me a link to open something that you already have on your iPad. So, but it's because you don't know where to go, where the file goes. And of course, those are things I know about because I do all that. So I'm going to train you how to do that. It's not going to cost you anything. It's going to be a special power hour, and it'll be when we don't know when we're going to do it. It's going to be sometime between now and the end of the year, and that would be really cool, I think, for some of you. And even if not, it'll be entertaining. I can tell you that. So there's that. And what else did I have to say? I mean, the next I should tell you this. So if you're looking to get in our next CFI class, you only got one choice. Let me go back to the thing. I want to show it to you so you can see it. Okay, Adobe Acrobat Pro. Let's share. So let's and show you the next power hours too, so you can see what they're going to be about. If I can do it, let's go. All right, so that's the Bootcamp Plus thing. Okay, that's fine. So the initial class is October 11th to the 17th. There is no seats open. Everything is sold out. So that's done. There's no seat. There is only one live stream spot left. So if you want to do that, you don't have any time. You got just a minimum amount of time to get in. November 1st is not going to be in Palo Alto. It's going to be in Opa-locka, Miami only. We have 2 seats open in the live class and 1 streaming spot left over. So as the year, what happens with our business and flight training in general is when the year comes up, starts getting to about August, September, and our business in the summertime is terrible. It's very low attendance because people are on vacation doing things. That's when their kids are off, all this stuff. Well, this time of year, everybody says, oh, I need to do the CFI thing. I need to get it all done. So all those classes fill up pretty quickly. And then New Year's comes and people say, oh, I have to do the CFI and I want to do it before summer and I can use it. And so the January, February, March classes are also very busy. And then after about May, June in this area, then it starts trickling out. So you can always get a class in the summertime. So these are the seats that are open. So I just wanted to tell you that. And we're doing less frequent classes in Palo Alto until I train up a new CFI. So I have a person there who can do the class, but I'm writing a syllabus for it because it needs to have its own instructor there. So instead of me traveling back and forth between it. So that's what's happening. And again, I would say the best thing you could do is join our membership site and get on the podcast if you want to. And those things are free to you. And those things keep you engaged in flight training. And I think that's kind of important. That you stay engaged in flight training, even if you're not going to do anything for a while or not going to do anything for a long time. It keeps you up to date. It keeps you informed, and when you're ready, you'll know who we are. That's our only hope, right? Like what was that from Star Wars? Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my only hope, right? So we hope that at one point, you'll say, oh, those are those guys I've known for years. I listened to them on the podcast. I listen to all the stuff. Seem like they know what's going on, and you know us, and that's kind of like our end hope. We don't hope that right now. We hope now we just can get you to get some free stuff so you can propel your learning, right? That's my goal. And with that, I want to see if there's in the chat. Let me just look here. I just want to catch up on some things. And so let me look at this. So I want to read some of the chats real quick. Oh, there's a lot of chats. No, we don't have, I don't know. They weren't any options for women's shirts where we went. It was just the shirt. There was the shirt. So what's the best or most unusual question that you ask you while deciding if you would be an instructor? Well, the one was, we could do it for free. And I said, no. That's one. Another unusual one was, the guy said, I hope you don't find this weird, but, and I didn't, right? It was okay. He said, but before, every time I take a lesson, I take lessons before, every time I go to the run-up area, he says, I have to do a prayer. And I'm like, okay. He says, and you'll be in it. I'm like, well, okay. Yeah, okay. I'm not offended, I guess. So that was, is that okay with you? And I'm like, I accept pretty much everybody how they are. So yeah, whatever you need to do, brother, you go do it, right? Well, so that's kind of a weird one, right? I think you forgot to factor in the student does have a number of, solo hours. Yes, that's correct. The solo hours would be at just that they wouldn't be paying an hour. They'd be paying for the airplane, right? But they wouldn't. Yes, right. That's correct. So let's do that. What's the real average for pass rate for? Okay, it's the real pass rate is somewhere, depending on how you factor it, is somewhere around 40%, 35, 40% first time pass rate. You can see pass rates as high as 70, depending on the region, but overall. So that's what it's not a good rate. It's equivalent to the instrument rating, which is also a pretty high fail rate, about 60% pass, 70% pass, maybe. So it's like that. Our pass rate in both locations is 90 or above, and that's because it's all we do, right? Oh, you're up to 100K. Great, Harold. Paper is back up to the backup. Yes, thanks. Harold did good in the class. We got along just fine. Get it together. Someone says, "Oh, you're an anesthesiologist too, and you agree with me." Of course, I'm happy. Oh, Lee, I didn't know you were. Now I know you're an anesthesiologist. Great. So I know I know who to ask our questions to. And yes, right. SAFE also gives you a discount with Cloud Ahoy. So join SAFE, Society of Aviation Flight Educators. You get a third off your 4-flight subscription. I'm not pitching it because I get anything from it. I'm just telling you it's a great organization. And you also get a discount on Cloud Ahoy. You get a discount on a bunch of things. And that'll really help you out. So there's the order. Good point. Yes. What's included? Okay. Yeah, you can also renew with Wings. That's true. I forgot about that. Okay, and you got it on his. Oh, you got that question in the oral with your bladder pilot, right? There you go. So you know what I'm telling you is the truth. I hope. All right. So that's that. So so what am I doing? I'm going over to the gym. I have a sweetheart deal. So you talk about someone who wants to find a good hourly rate. Well, that was kind of me. So I found a person who has his own gym that has Nautilus equipment and free weights there, and he's also a physical therapist, and his wife makes a ton of money, and so I get to use the gym, and I get to have training from him for $30 per hour, sometimes 25. I mean, that's almost free, right? So yeah, I look for a good deal too, but if you're looking for a good deal for me, you're not going to get it. So sorry, that's just how it's going to be. Okay, we'll see you all next week if you're around. Thanks for showing up, and I hope you got something out of it.
Welcome to Miami. Bouncing in the club with the keys on all night from the beach to the break of dawn. I'm going to Miami. Welcome to Miami. I'm gonna hurt the rainstorms, ain't nothing to mess with, but I can't feel a drip on the strip. It's a trip. Ladies have dress full of your whip, and they be screaming out, "Will we love to last night?" So I'm thinking I'ma screw me something hot in this South Summer rain game down the pot. Hottest club in the city, and it's right on the beach. Temperature 50, it's about to reach.